One big theme I heard through several tables is the point of vision, that PDs need a clear vision for their roles at many levels. They need to understand their job and what their overall goals are for, the purpose behind them, and sort of overall what they're driving towards. They need to understand, they need to have a vision for Round Zero itself and understand the purpose of the Round Zero strategy. And I think they also just need to have a conception for what is their role relative to core members, core member effectiveness and satisfaction, and our long-term movement. So I heard a number of people pulling that out. Felicia's table was talking about a series of things, including a plan. PDs need a practical plan that they can use for Round Zero and that will help them juggle the various things they need to manage. And finally, I heard several groups talk about relationships. You know, last year we made so many strides with PD core member relationships, and on the one hand, it's so important that the PD and core member are on the same side of the table and they're working towards the same thing and they have a positive relationship. The fact that we achieved this in many ways last year and saw our satisfaction increase as a result of it, and it's so important. The kind of next level I heard people talking about was adding a transformative nature to this relationship, building relationships that are truly goal-oriented and really changing reality. Samantha, what did you hear?
Sure. I think the last three things that are up here, I also heard a number of different tables talking about and had some reflections myself. And so I heard three different teams. So I heard the Connecticut team, I heard the Bay, I heard Philly and Camden talk a lot about knowledge about our tools and resources. And there are lots of tools and resources. There are the online courses, there's the SAT, there's the resource exchange, there's Talon, there's TAL. Like this list is, that's just the beginning of the list. And it's literally like our PDs need to understand and internalize those things in language that is their own so that they're able to guide core members through all of those different resources and all of that different learning. I think the second piece, which is very striking to me, is our PDs need to have the skill to manage core member execution. And I think in the program director role, many of our program directors are coming to us from the classroom. They're making a huge shift from being in a classroom where they're managing their students to being in a team where they're managing core members. And so it's critical that our program directors have the ability to set expectations, set deadlines, ensure that our core members understand the path that we want them to be on through Round Zero, and that our PDs have the skill to make that happen both on the front end with the setup, but also as we're following through and meeting challenges along the way. Which I think takes us to the last point, which is the ability to make good decisions and demonstrate judgment. And this is a piece that we're bringing out and calling more attention to this year, and I'm really glad to see that we're doing that. The PD role is a role that requires judgment. As Zoe was setting us up at our kickoff of this conference yesterday, she was just talking about you can have the best plan, and there's going to be not just one obstacle, but countless obstacles put in front of you. And so it's imperative that our program directors have the ability to stop and say, wait, this is a challenge. It's not the biggest challenge I'm facing right now. Here's how I'm going to prioritize. Or this is a challenge and it's so robust that I need to have the skill and knowledge and mindset to be able to overcome it. And I think that decision-making and judgment piece is just something I'm really excited to see and glad we're going to be building in opportunities to help our PDs to develop here. So these are 6 of the biggest high-level conceptual things that we think program directors are going to need, and we're going to be talking through and thinking about as we're thinking through the PDIs today. What I think is really important is that there are 2 distinct framing points that I want to make for us. The first is just this distinction between PD onboarding and PD training in Round Zero. So on many of our teams, we're going to be onboarding some number of new program directors. And they're going to start that onboarding by some self-led learning, online learning before the summer conference, through the summer conference, and then there's going to be in-person, in-region work that's happening. And there's going to be stuff that's about Round Zero, and there's also going to be training that we're looking for you to do that's beyond the scope of Round Zero. It's really important that as we think about that distinction from what we're focusing on here is just what does the PD layer of learning need to look like within our Round Zero plans? What are the things that we're going to need to do in our region to ensure that that self-led learning and summer conference work is utilized and understood? What are the things we're going to need to do in our regions to make sure that what happens at those conferences is translating in real time in our regions? So that's one thing that I think is just really critical to keep in mind as we're moving forward this afternoon. The second thing that I think is is, so during the last session, Scott and Felicia very cutely set us up to be thinking about how we were putting on our core member shoes. Edlyn and I don't have as cute of an analogy, but literally what we need to do during this session is put ourselves in a program director's shoes. And so we all have different teams and different situations that we're going to be facing in round 0. And so I want to push all of us to at least be thinking throughout this session through the eyes of at least one PD. So you identify, should I take on the role of new PD, because that's going to be pretty typical in my region. Should I think about things through the lens of veteran PD, because that's going to be pretty typical in my region. Or do I actually have a region that has a pretty fair balance, and I should push myself within the context of 3 PDIs and be 2 different PDs, be both a new PD and a veteran PD. I want to caution everyone to not take an extreme, so not take your highest performer, not take the person who has the most hurdles that they're having to climb over, but take somebody who is going to be typical and resonant for you as we move through this session. So, take 30 seconds, go back to that planning tool that you were utilizing, and just kind of record for yourself what you're thinking is going to be happening either through the new PD lens or the veteran PD lens, and just establish for yourself which PD or PDs are you going to be during this session, and just put those names out there so that you have the ability to continue to think about what are some of the pitfalls that this person's going to